The desert storm hit Phoenix without warning, turning the evening sky into a wall of dust and lightning. Leo Martinez squinted through the windshield of his battered pickup truck, desperately trying to make out the road ahead. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. His 6-year-old daughter Sofia sat in the passenger seat, her small hands clutching her diabetes kit as another wave of nausea washed over her. The insulin they'd picked up from the pharmacy was already getting warm in the sweltering heat, and with the air conditioning struggling against the storm, Leo knew they were running out of time. "Daddy, I don't feel good," Sofia whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind outside. Leo's heart raced as he pulled over to the side of the deserted highway, watching his daughter's skin grow pale and clammy. He'd seen this before. Her blood sugar was dropping dangerously low, and they were still 20 minutes from home in perfect weather conditions. In the storm, it could take an hour. That's when he saw it through the dust and rain. A sleek black Rolls Royce pulled over on the shoulder, its hazard lights blinking desperately. Steam poured from under the hood, and Leo could see a figure hunched over the engine bay, soaked to the bone. Any other night, Leo would have driven past. He had his own problems to deal with, but something about the way the man stood there, completely helpless despite his expensive car, reminded Leo of his own desperation just moments before. Leo pulled his truck behind the Rolls Royce and grabbed his emergency toolkit from the back. Sofia needed to get home, but he couldn't leave another person stranded in weather like this. The man by the car looked up as Leo approached. He was probably in his early 30s, wearing designer clothes that were now completely ruined by the storm. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and his expensive leather shoes were caked with mud. "Engine trouble?" Leo called out over the wind, already knowing the answer. The man nodded frantically, relief flooding his face at seeing help arrive. "It just started overheating and died," the man shouted back. "I've been trying to call for help, but there's no signal out here." Leo could see the genuine fear in the stranger's eyes. This wasn't just about being inconvenienced. There was something deeper, more urgent driving his panic. Leo popped the hood of the Rolls Royce and immediately spotted the problem. A radiator hose had burst, spraying coolant all over the pristine engine bay. It was a simple fix, but without the right parts, the car wasn't going anywhere. In the back of his mind, Leo calculated the cost. A tow truck in this weather would charge at least $300, and that was if they could even find one willing to come out in the storm. "I can fix this," Leo said, "but I'll need to get a replacement hose from my shop. It's about 15 minutes from here." The man's face fell, clearly expecting to be abandoned like everyone else who'd driven past without stopping. "Listen," Leo continued, wiping rain from his eyes. "My daughter is sick and I need to get her home, but I can't leave you stranded out here. Follow me back to my shop in your car once I get it running temporarily. I'll patch this up enough to get you there safely." The stranger stared at Leo in disbelief. "You'd do that? You don't even know me." Leo glanced back at his truck where Sofia sat waiting, then looked at this man who, despite his obvious wealth, was completely vulnerable in the middle of nowhere. "Sometimes we all need help from strangers," he said simply. He spent the next 20 minutes in the pouring rain, using electrical tape and spare clamps to create a temporary seal on the damaged hose. His clothes were soaked through, his hands were numb from the cold, and Sofia was getting sicker by the minute, but Leo couldn't bring himself to do anything less than his best work. When the Rolls Royce finally roared back to life, the relief on the stranger's face was unmistakable. "How much do I owe you?" he asked, reaching for what looked like an expensive wallet. Leo waved him off. "Just follow me and drive carefully. We'll sort everything out once we're somewhere dry." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. As they drove through the storm toward Martinez auto shop, Leo had no idea that this simple act of kindness would completely change his and Sofia's lives forever. The man in the Rolls Royce wasn't just any stranded motorist. He was David Chen, founder and CEO of Medicore Technologies, worth over $2 billion, and he'd been driving through Phoenix under an assumed name for reasons that would soon become clear. But first, Leo had to get his daughter the medical attention she desperately needed, completely unaware that the man following behind them in the luxury sedan was about to become the most important person in their lives. Leo Martinez hadn't always been just another small-town mechanic struggling to make ends meet. 5 years ago, he'd been a senior aerospace engineer at Stellar Dynamics, one of Phoenix's most prestigious defense contractors. He'd worn tailored suits to work, driven a company car, and lived in a 4-bedroom house in Paradise Valley with his wife Maria and baby Sofia. Back then, his biggest worry had been whether to accept the promotion to lead engineer on the Mars rover project or take the offer from Boeing in Seattle. Everything changed the day the Pentagon contracts dried up. Budget cuts hit the defense industry like a tsunami, and Stellar Dynamics laid off 60% of their workforce in a single morning. Leo still remembered sitting in that sterile conference room, watching 20 years of aerospace experience reduced to a severance package and a cardboard box of personal items. The mortgage payments on their dream house suddenly became impossible, and the stress began eating away at his marriage like acid. Maria had never signed up to be married to a mechanic. When Leo inherited his grandfather's rundown auto shop on the south side of Phoenix, she saw it as a temporary setback, something they'd laugh about later when he found another engineering job. But months turned into years, and the engineering interviews grew fewer and farther between. Age discrimination was real in the tech industry, and at 38, Leo found himself competing with recent graduates who would work for half his previous salary. The final blow came when Sofia was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at age 4. The medical bills were staggering, even with insurance. Maria couldn't handle watching their daughter's daily struggle with blood sugar monitoring, insulin injections, and constant vigilance. She'd never been good with medical crises, fainting at the sight of needles and panicking whenever Sofia's glucose levels spiked. Leo became the primary caregiver, learning everything he could about diabetes management while trying to keep the auto shop profitable. One Tuesday morning, Leo woke up to find a note on the kitchen table. Maria had taken a job with a pharmaceutical company in Denver and was leaving immediately. She couldn't handle the stress anymore, she wrote, and thought Sofia would be better off with Leo as the primary parent. The divorce papers arrived 2 weeks later, along with a check for her half of the house sale and a promise of minimal child support payments that rarely arrived on time. Now Leo lived with Sofia in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Desert View, a working-class complex where the pool hadn't worked in 3 years and the air conditioning units struggled against the Arizona heat. Every morning started the same way, checking Sofia's blood glucose levels, calculating her insulin dosage, packing her diabetes supplies for school, and hoping the ancient refrigerator in their kitchen wouldn't fail and spoil her insulin reserves. The auto shop barely kept them afloat. Leo specialized in older vehicles because he couldn't afford the diagnostic equipment needed for newer cars with their complex computer systems. His customers were mostly other struggling families who needed reliable transportation at affordable prices. He charged fair rates and often let payment plans slide longer than he should, remembering his own desperation during those first months after the layoffs. Sofia had adapted to their new life with the resilience that only children possess, but Leo knew she was aware of their financial struggles. She never asked for expensive toys or complained about shopping at thrift stores. When other kids in her class talked about family vacations or new gadgets, Sofia would quietly change the subject. She'd become his little partner, helping organize tools in the shop after school and doing homework at the small desk Leo had set up in the office. The diabetes made everything more complicated and expensive. Sofia needed constant monitoring, and her glucose meter, test strips, and insulin consumed a significant portion of Leo's monthly income. He'd learned to check prices at 3 different pharmacies and sometimes drove across town to save $20 on her supplies. Insurance covered the basics, but the premium glucose monitors and insulin pumps that could make Sofia's life easier remained out of reach. David Chen, meanwhile, had built his fortune by understanding exactly the kind of struggles Leo faced daily. Medicor Technologies had started in David's Stanford dorm room with a simple idea: medical devices should be affordable and accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy. His first product had been a glucose monitoring system that cost 90% less than existing devices, while providing more accurate readings. By age 32, David's company had revolutionized diabetes care, heart monitoring, and emergency medical devices. Forbes had featured him on 3 covers, calling him the most influential medical technology innovator of his generation. Medicore's stock price had made David worth over $2 billion, and his inventions had literally saved millions of lives around the world. But success had come with unexpected costs. David's every movement was tracked by financial media, his dating life dissected by tabloids, and his business decisions scrutinized by competitors looking for any advantage. He'd learned to be suspicious of everyone's motivations, never sure if people wanted to be friends with David Chen the person or David Chen the billionaire. The pressure had intensified after his father Robert suffered a stroke 6 months earlier. Robert Chen had immigrated to America with nothing, working 16-hour days in restaurants and laundromats to put David through school. Now he lived in a specialized care facility in Scottsdale, his speech slurred and his memory fading. David visited every week, but the man who had taught him the value of hard work and helping others sometimes didn't recognize his own son. David had started taking long drives through Arizona's back roads to clear his head, using rental cars and false names to avoid recognition. He'd grown up poor in San Francisco's Chinatown, where neighbors looked out for each other and help was given freely without expectation of reward. The wealth had insulated him from real human connection, and these anonymous drives were his only chance to remember who he'd been before the money changed everything. That stormy night when his rental car broke down, David had been returning from one of his father's bad days. Robert hadn't spoken during the entire visit, just stared out the window at the desert landscape with vacant eyes. David had been crying as he drove through the storm, which was why he hadn't noticed the temperature gauge climbing until the engine started smoking. When Leo approached through the rain, David's first instinct had been suspicion. Was this some elaborate scheme by a competitor or journalist? But watching Leo work in the storm while his own daughter sat sick in the truck, David recognized something he rarely saw anymore: genuine human kindness offered without any agenda. The temporary repair Leo performed was flawless, the work of someone who truly understood engines and took pride in doing things right. David had owned dozens of expensive cars over the years, and he'd never seen anyone work so carefully under such difficult conditions. Most mechanics would have done the minimum necessary to get the car moving, but Leo treated the Rolls Royce engine with the same attention he'd give his own vehicle. As they drove through the storm toward Martinez auto shop, David found himself genuinely curious about this man who'd stopped to help a stranger, despite having his own emergency to handle. In a world where most people wanted something from him, Leo's simple act of kindness felt like discovering water in the desert. David had no idea that helping Leo with his daughter's medical needs would become the most important investment of his life, or that this struggling mechanic possessed the kind of innovative thinking that Medicore desperately needed for their next breakthrough. The Martinez auto shop sat on a corner lot in one of Phoenix's older neighborhoods, surrounded by small houses with chain-link fences and desert landscaping. Leo's grandfather had opened the shop in 1962, and 3 generations of the Martinez family had kept it running through economic booms and busts. The building needed paint, and the sign had faded from decades of Arizona sun, but Leo maintained the equipment meticulously, and the work bays were spotlessly clean. As they pulled into the parking lot, David noticed a small apartment above the shop, with toys visible on a tiny balcony. Sofia's bedroom window glowed with soft light, and David could see children's drawings taped to the glass. This wasn't just a business for Leo. It was home, legacy, and survival, all rolled into one weathered building that represented everything David's wealth had cost him to leave behind. The repair of David's Rolls Royce took 3 hours, but it marked the beginning of something neither man expected. Leo worked methodically in his garage while David sat in the small office, watching Sofia color at her desk despite feeling unwell. The little girl had insisted she was fine, but Leo kept checking her glucose levels every 30 minutes, his weathered hands gentle as he pricked her finger for blood samples. David found himself fascinated by the interaction between father and daughter. Sofia never complained about the testing, simply extending her small finger and returning to her artwork while Leo analyzed the results with the precision of a scientist. When her numbers looked concerning, Leo would quietly prepare a snack with exact carbohydrate counts, explaining to Sofia why she needed to eat, even though she didn't feel hungry. "My daddy knows everything about diabetes," Sofia announced proudly to David while Leo worked under the Rolls Royce's hood. "He reads medical books every night and talks to doctors on the computer." David looked at the stack of endocrinology journals on Leo's desk, many filled with handwritten notes and highlighted passages. This wasn't casual research. Leo had essentially educated himself to the level of a medical professional. When the repair was complete, David insisted on paying Leo for the work, but Leo quoted a price that barely covered the cost of parts. "You were stuck in a storm," Leo said simply. "Anyone would have done the same thing." David knew that wasn't true. In his experience, most people would have driven past without stopping, especially with their own child needing medical attention. 3 days later, David returned to the shop with his father's vintage 1969 Camaro, claiming it had developed an intermittent stalling problem. The truth was, David had deliberately disconnected a sensor to create the issue. He wanted to see Leo work again, to understand what made this man different from everyone else he encountered. Leo diagnosed the problem in minutes, but spent 2 hours going through the entire electrical system, finding and fixing several other issues that could have caused expensive damage down the road. "Your father took good care of this car," Leo told David as he cleaned the engine bay. "These classic muscle cars are becoming rare. Someone who loves automobiles maintained this one." David felt a pang of emotion. His father had indeed cherished the Camaro, spending weekends in their small garage teaching David about engines and craftsmanship. "He's not doing so well now," David admitted. "Stroke last year. Sometimes he doesn't remember the car or much else." Leo stopped working and looked at David with genuine compassion. "I'm sorry to hear that. My grandfather built this shop, and some days I can still feel him here, guiding my hands when I work on the older vehicles. The people who teach us about engines teach us about life too." That afternoon, Sofia had a severe hypoglycemic episode while Leo was working. Her blood sugar dropped so rapidly that she became disoriented and couldn't communicate clearly. David watched Leo spring into action with practiced efficiency, administering glucose gel and monitoring Sofia's vital signs while calling her pediatric endocrinologist. "This happens sometimes," Leo explained to David while they waited for Sofia to stabilize. "Her pancreas stopped producing insulin completely, so we have to be her pancreas manually. Every calculation has to be perfect, every meal planned, every activity monitored. One mistake, and she could end up in a coma." David was struck by the enormous responsibility Leo carried every single day. Managing diabetes wasn't just about giving injections. It required constant vigilance, mathematical precision, and the ability to make life-or-death medical decisions multiple times daily. Leo had essentially become a pediatric nurse, endocrinologist, and emergency medical technician, all while running his business and being a single father. Over the following weeks, David found excuses to visit the shop regularly. Sometimes he brought other vehicles from his collection, claiming they needed maintenance. Other times, he simply stopped by with coffee and pastries, saying he was in the neighborhood. Leo gradually opened up about the challenges of single parenthood and the constant worry about Sofia's health. The worst part isn't the medical stuff. Leo confided one afternoon while they worked together on David's supposed transmission problem. "It's knowing that if something happens to me, Sofia would be alone. My ex-wife can't handle the diabetes management, and there's no other family. I've taught a few neighbors the basics, but it's not enough. Sometimes I lie awake wondering what would happen if I had a heart attack or got hit by a car." David began bringing small gifts for Sofia: art supplies, books about science, and educational toys that engaged her curiosity. He never brought anything expensive enough to make Leo uncomfortable, but Sofia's face lit up whenever Mr. David arrived with a new activity. She started showing him her school projects and sharing stories about her classmates. The breakthrough came when Sofia mentioned struggling with a math assignment about ratios and percentages. David offered to help, and Leo reluctantly agreed after Sofia begged enthusiastically. What Leo witnessed over the next hour changed his perception of David completely. David didn't just help Sofia with her homework. He transformed it into an engaging exploration of mathematical concepts. He used her diabetes management as real-world examples, showing how ratios determined insulin dosages and percentages calculated carbohydrate intake. Sofia grasped concepts that had been confusing her for weeks, and more importantly, she began to see her medical condition as something that made her special rather than different. "You're a natural teacher," Leo observed after Sofia went to bed that night. "Have you worked with kids before?" David hesitated before answering. "I tutored other students in college, but that was a long time ago. Sofia reminds me why I got into medical technology in the first place, to help people like her live normal lives." As autumn progressed, their friendship deepened through shared experiences. David started joining Leo and Sofia for weekend activities, Trips to the Phoenix Zoo, visits to science museums, and quiet evenings working on Sofia's school projects. Leo taught David practical skills like basic car maintenance and woodworking, while David helped Sofia with advanced mathematics and science concepts. The turning point came during Sofia's school science fair. She had chosen to create a project about diabetes management, building a working model that demonstrated how different foods affected blood glucose levels. David spent hours helping her construct the display, using his engineering background to make the project both scientifically accurate and visually impressive. On the night of the science fair, Leo watched David interact with other parents and teachers. David was patient with children who asked questions about Sofia's project, knowledgeable when discussing the science behind diabetes, and genuinely proud of Sofia's accomplishments. Several parents complimented Leo on having such a supportive friend, and Leo realized that somewhere along the way, David had become family. The evening ended with Sofia winning first place in the medical sciences category. Her project would advance to the state competition, something that would require travel expenses Leo couldn't afford. Without being asked, David offered to sponsor the trip, framing it as an investment in Sofia's educational future rather than charity. "I don't accept handouts," Leo said firmly, the old pride surfacing despite their friendship. "This isn't a handout," David replied. "Sofia earned this opportunity through her hard work and intelligence. I'm simply removing financial barriers so she can compete at the level her abilities deserve." That night, Leo found himself reconsidering his assumptions about wealth and generosity. David never flaunted his resources or made Leo feel inferior about their economic differences. Instead, he used his advantages quietly and thoughtfully, always preserving Leo's dignity while ensuring Sofia had access to opportunities that could change her future. Sofia's success at the state science fair opened doors neither Leo nor David had anticipated. Representatives from several universities contacted them about summer programs for gifted students interested in medical research. Sofia, now 8 years old, had created something that impressed collegiate-level scientists and researchers. During the drive home from the state competition, Sofia fell asleep in the back seat while Leo and David talked quietly about the future. "She's going to do incredible things," David said, watching the little girl sleep with her first-place medal clutched in her hand. "I know," Leo replied. "I just hope I can provide her with everything she needs to reach her potential." David looked at his friend, and Leo had truly become his closest friend with deep respect. "You already are, Leo. Everything Sofia has become is because of your love, your dedication, and your refusal to give up when things got difficult. The opportunities are just extras." As they drove through the desert night toward Phoenix, both men understood that their lives had become intertwined in ways that went far beyond a chance meeting during a storm. David had found the authentic human connection he'd been seeking, while Leo had discovered that accepting help didn't mean surrendering independence. Sofia had gained a mentor who recognized her intellectual gifts and could help her develop them. What neither man realized was how dramatically their growing bond was about to be tested, when circumstances would force them to choose between personal pride and the welfare of someone they both loved more than their own comfort. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, bearing the letterhead of Phoenix Children's Hospital's Diabetes Research Institute. Leo's hands trembled as he read the contents. Sofia had been selected for an experimental treatment program that could potentially reduce her dependence on insulin injections. The therapy involved cutting-edge technology and would cost over $40,000, far beyond Leo's financial reach even with insurance coverage. Leo sat in his office staring at the letter, torn between hope and desperation. This treatment could give Sofia a chance at a more normal childhood, reducing the constant blood sugar monitoring and multiple daily injections that had defined her life. But the cost was impossible, and the payment deadline was only 3 weeks away. That same afternoon, Dr. Rebecca Martinez from the Research Institute called personally. "Mr. Martinez, I wanted to discuss Sofia's acceptance into our program. We rarely see such a young patient with her level of understanding about diabetes management. She's an ideal candidate for this treatment." "About the cost," Leo began, but Dr. Martinez interrupted him. "Actually, that's why I'm calling. We've received an anonymous donation to our research fund specifically designated for Sofia's treatment. The entire cost has been covered, including any follow-up care she might need." Leo felt the blood drain from his face. "Anonymous? What do you mean, anonymous?" "The donor requested complete confidentiality. but they've provided full funding for Sofia's participation in the program. We can begin treatment as early as next week if you consent. After hanging up, Leo sat in stunned silence. Only 3 people knew about Sofia's acceptance into the program: himself, Sofia, and David, whom Sofia had excitedly told during his visit yesterday. The timing was too coincidental to be anything else. That evening, when David arrived at the shop as he did most weekdays, Leo confronted him directly. "We need to talk." David sensed the tension immediately. "Is Sofia okay? Did something happen at school?" "Sofia's fine. But I got a call today from Phoenix Children's Hospital. Apparently, someone made an anonymous donation to cover her experimental treatment. $40,000, David. Who else could afford that kind of money?" David's expression remained carefully neutral. "That's wonderful news. Sofia deserves access to the best medical care available." "Don't lie to me," Leo's voice rose with frustration. "I trusted you. I thought we were friends, equals. But you've been treating me like some charity case, haven't you? The frequent car repairs that never seemed quite real, the expensive parts you claimed were discounted, now this massive medical payment behind my back." David tried to explain. "Leo, the treatment could change Sofia's life. You said yourself that you worry about her future, about managing her diabetes long-term. This technology could give her independence she's never had. That's not the point." Leo slammed his fist on the workbench. "The point is you went behind my back and made decisions about my daughter's medical care without consulting me. You had no right to do that, no matter how much money you have." "I was trying to help," David said quietly. "Sofia is brilliant, and she deserves every opportunity to reach her potential. Why does it matter where the funding comes from if it gives her a better life?" Leo stared at David with a mixture of hurt and anger. "Because it matters to me. Because I'm her father, and I'm supposed to provide for her. Because accepting your charity makes me feel like I've failed as a parent." "This isn't about charity," David insisted. "It's about giving Sofia the best possible chance at a healthy future. Your pride isn't more important than her welfare." "My pride?" Leo's voice turned cold. "You think this is about pride? This is about respect, David. This is about you treating me like an equal partner in this friendship, instead of some poor mechanic you can throw money at whenever you feel guilty about your wealth." David's composure finally cracked. "You have no idea what it's like to have money, and never know if people care about you or just want something from you. For months, I thought I'd found a real friend. Someone who saw me as David the person instead of David the billionaire. But apparently even you can't separate me from my bank account." Leo froze. "Billionaire? What are you talking about?" The words hung in the air between them like a physical barrier. David realized he'd revealed more than he intended, and there was no taking it back now. "You're him, aren't you?" Leo said slowly, pieces falling into place. "David Chen, Medicore Technologies. I've seen your face on magazine covers in the waiting room at Sofia's doctor's office. You've been lying to me this entire time." David's shoulders sagged. "I never lied about who I am fundamentally. I just didn't tell you about the company, about the money. Everything else has been real. My friendship with you, my care for Sofia, my respect for what you've accomplished as a father. Everything has been a lie," Leo said bitterly. "The broken-down cars, the convenient meetings, even that night in the storm. Was any of it real? Or was I just some interesting charity project for the tech billionaire?" "The storm was completely real," David protested. "I had no idea who you were or that we'd become friends. The car problems afterward, yes, some of those were manufactured, but only because I wanted to spend time with you and Sofia. I've never had friends like you before." Leo laughed harshly. "Friends don't lie to each other for months. Friends don't make major decisions about each other's children behind their backs. You've been playing games with our lives, David. Deciding what's best for us without any input from the people actually living those lives." "I was protecting Sofia's opportunity," David said desperately. "If I'd told you I was paying for the treatment, you would have refused out of stubborn pride, and Sofia would have missed this chance." "That was my choice to make," Leo shouted. "She's my daughter, not yours. You don't get to decide what's best for her just because you have money and I don't." Sofia appeared in the doorway of the office, tears streaming down her face. She'd been doing homework in the apartment upstairs when the shouting started, and now she stood looking between the 2 men who meant everything to her. "Why are you fighting?" she asked in a small voice. "Did I do something wrong?" Both men immediately knelt to her level, their argument temporarily forgotten in the face of her distress. "No, sweetheart," Leo said gently. "You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes adults disagree about things, but it's not your fault." Sofia looked at David with confusion. "Are you really rich, like Daddy said? Like the people on TV?" David hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, Sofia. I have a lot of money, and I used some of it to help pay for your special treatment at the hospital." "I don't understand," Sofia said, wiping her eyes. "If you wanted to help me, why is Daddy mad? I thought friends helped each other." Leo felt his heart break at his daughter's innocent question. How could he explain adult concepts like pride, dignity, and autonomy to an 8-year-old who only saw kindness being rejected? "It's complicated, Princess," Leo said finally. "Sometimes when people help us, we want to make sure they're helping for the right reasons." "What are wrong reasons?" Sofia asked. David spoke before Leo could respond. "Your daddy is worried that I'm helping you because I feel sorry for you, instead of helping because I care about you. He wants to make sure our friendship is real." Sofia considered this seriously, then looked at David with the direct honesty only children possess. "Do you feel sorry for me?" "No," David replied immediately. "I think you're the smartest, bravest, most amazing little girl I've ever met. I help you because I love you and your daddy, and I want you to have every chance to do incredible things with your life." "Then why can't Daddy just say thank you?" Sofia asked with 8-year-old logic that cut through all the complex emotions. Leo stared at his daughter, realizing how his pride and fear had created a situation where kindness was being punished instead of celebrated. But the hurt ran deeper than Sofia could understand. David's deception about his identity felt like a betrayal of trust that Leo wasn't sure he could forgive. "Because sometimes adults make things more complicated than they need to be," Leo said sadly. That evening, after David left without resolving anything, Leo tucked Sofia into bed and tried to answer her questions about their argument. "Is Mr. David not going to come see us anymore?" she asked, clutching her favorite stuffed animal. "I don't know, sweetheart. We're both pretty upset right now. But he loves us," Sofia said with certainty. "I can tell when people love me, and Mr. David loves us like family." Leo kissed her forehead, knowing she was right, but unsure how to bridge the gap that had opened between him and David. The trust that had taken months to build felt shattered by David's deception and financial manipulation, even though Leo understood that David's intentions had been good. 3 days passed without contact. David didn't come to the shop, and Leo didn't call. Sofia asked about David every day, becoming increasingly withdrawn as she sensed the permanent nature of their separation. Then the second crisis hit with devastating force. Maria, Leo's ex-wife, returned to Phoenix with papers from a high-powered law firm, demanding immediate modification of their custody arrangement. She wanted Sofia to spend the upcoming school year in Denver, claiming that Leo's financial instability and Sofia's recent medical episodes proved he couldn't provide adequate care. The legal documents cited Sofia's hospitalization the previous month, Leo's inconsistent income from the auto shop, and their modest living conditions as evidence that Sofia would be better served living with Maria and her new husband, a successful investment banker who could provide superior educational and medical resources. Leo stared at the custody papers with growing panic, realizing that his pride had cost him the one person who could have helped navigate this legal challenge. David's wealth and connections in the medical community could have made the difference, but Leo had driven away his most powerful ally at the worst possible time. As he sat alone in his empty shop that night, surrounded by the tools and memories of 3 generations of Martinez mechanics, Leo finally understood the true cost of his stubborn independence. The custody hearing was scheduled for 10 in the morning, and Leo sat in the courthouse hallway at 9:30, watching expensive lawyers file past with leather briefcases and confident smiles. His own attorney, a public defender named Jessica Torres, had been honest about their chances. Maria's legal team had built a compelling case around financial stability and medical resources that Leo simply couldn't match. Sofia sat beside him in her best dress, swinging her legs nervously and asking if they could go home soon. Leo had tried to explain the situation in terms an 8-year-old could understand. But how do you tell a child that someone might take her away from the only parent who truly knew her? At 9:45, Leo heard familiar footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. He looked up to see David approaching with an older gentleman in an expensive suit. David looked tired, like he hadn't slept in days, but his expression was determined. "Leo," David said quietly, stopping a respectful distance away. "I know you don't want to see me, but I couldn't stay away knowing what's happening today." "What are you doing here?" Leo asked, though his voice lacked the anger that had characterized their last conversation. "This is Marcus Webb." David indicated the man beside him. "He's one of the best family law attorneys in Arizona, and he's volunteered to represent you in this hearing." Leo shook his head. "I can't accept more help from you, David. We've been through this." "This isn't about you and me," David said firmly. "This is about Sofia. She belongs with her father, not with someone who abandoned her for 4 years and now wants to disrupt her life for selfish reasons." Marcus Webb stepped forward. "Mr. Martinez, I've reviewed your case extensively. Your ex-wife's petition has significant weaknesses that can be addressed, but we need to act quickly." Sofia had been watching this exchange with growing excitement. She suddenly jumped up and hugged David tightly. "I knew you'd come back. I told Daddy you loved us too much to stay away forever." David knelt to Sofia's level, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'm sorry I've been gone, sweetheart. Your daddy and I had a disagreement, but that doesn't change how much I care about you." Leo watched his daughter's face light up with joy and realized how much damage his pride had caused. Sofia had lost someone she considered family because of his inability to accept help gracefully. "David, I owe you an apology," Leo said slowly. "You were trying to help Sofia, and I made it about my own insecurities instead of her welfare." "We both made mistakes," David replied. "I should have been honest about who I was from the beginning, and I should have discussed the medical payment with you before acting." Marcus Webb cleared his throat gently. "Gentlemen, we have 20 minutes to prepare a defense. Mr. Martinez, I need you to trust me to represent your interests. Mr. Chen has provided documentation about Sofia's medical care, her academic achievements, and testimony from her teachers about her emotional stability under your care." The hearing proceeded differently than Leo had expected. Instead of focusing solely on financial resources, Marcus Webb systematically demonstrated Leo's exceptional parenting abilities. He presented Sofia's medical records showing perfect diabetes management, her academic achievements including the state science fair victory, and testimony from teachers, neighbors, and even Sofia's pediatric endocrinologist about the extraordinary care Leo provided. David testified about witnessing Leo's dedication firsthand, describing the countless hours Leo spent researching diabetes management, his perfect attendance at every medical appointment, and his ability to handle emergencies with calm professionalism. He spoke about Sofia's happiness, her sense of security, and the strong father-daughter bond that formed the foundation of her emotional stability. The turning point came when the judge asked to speak with Sofia privately. Leo waited anxiously while his daughter spent 15 minutes in the judge's chambers, wondering what questions she was being asked and how she would respond. When Sofia returned, she looked confident and composed despite her young age. The judge announced his decision immediately. Custody would remain with Leo, with Maria granted regular visitation rights that acknowledged her role as Sofia's mother while preserving the stability Sofia had found with her father. Outside the courthouse, Maria approached Leo with an expression of grudging respect. "Your friend made some compelling arguments in there," she said, nodding toward David. "Maybe Sofia's better off with you after all." "She needs her mother too," Leo replied generously. "Just not at the expense of everything else she's built here." Maria nodded slowly. "I'd like to visit regularly if that's okay. Maybe I can learn to handle the medical stuff better this time." "We can work something out," Leo agreed. "For Sofia's sake." 3 months later, Leo stood in the workshop of his newly expanded auto shop, watching David and Sofia work together on a science project that would represent Arizona at the national competition. The experimental diabetes treatment had been successful, reducing Sofia's daily insulin requirements significantly and giving her more freedom to be a normal kid. David's investment in Martinez Auto Shop had allowed Leo to purchase modern diagnostic equipment and hire 2 additional mechanics, transforming the business from survival mode to genuine prosperity. More importantly, David's involvement was transparent now, structured as a business partnership rather than hidden charity. Sofia rushed between them with excitement, showing off her project about renewable energy applications in automotive technology. "Daddy, look what Mr. David taught me about solar panels. We could put them on electric cars to make them run longer." "That's brilliant, Princess," Leo said, lifting her up to examine the working model more closely. "You might just revolutionize the car industry someday. Mr. David says I could work for his company when I grow up, or maybe start my own company," Sofia announced proudly. David smiled. "The world will need engineers like Sofia to solve the problems we're creating today. With her intelligence and her father's work ethic, she'll be unstoppable." That evening, after Sofia had gone to bed, clutching her latest science award, Leo and David sat on the shop's small patio sharing coffee and planning the business expansion. "I still can't believe how much has changed," Leo said, looking at the architectural plans for their new facility. "6 months ago, I was barely keeping the lights on." "You are already successful," David replied. "You are raising an extraordinary daughter, building a reputation for honest work, and maintaining your integrity despite incredible challenges. I just helped remove some financial obstacles." Leo nodded thoughtfully. "Sofia asked me yesterday if you were going to be her stepdad someday." David nearly choked on his coffee. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that families come in all different shapes, and sometimes the people who love us most aren't related by blood or marriage." David looked at his friend with deep affection. "She's lucky to have you as a father, Leo. You've given her something no amount of money can buy: unconditional love and the confidence to pursue her dreams." "We've both given her that," Leo corrected gently. "You've been as much a parent to Sofia as anyone could be without official papers." As they sat under the desert stars, both men understood that their friendship had been tested and emerged stronger. Leo had learned to accept help without surrendering his dignity, while David had discovered that true relationships were built on honesty and mutual respect, rather than financial advantage. Sofia's voice called from her bedroom window above the shop. "Daddy, Mr. David, come look at Jupiter through my telescope." They climbed the stairs together, ready to explore the universe with an 8-year-old girl who believed anything was possible when people who loved each other worked together. Sometimes the best families weren't born. They were chosen, one act of kindness at a time, one moment of trust building upon another, until strangers became something more precious than relatives. They became home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.